This presentation is brought to you by Sovereign Laboratories, manufacturers of the most bioavailable colostrum on the market, clinically proven to heal leaky gut syndrome.
Are you okay if we make this a little interactive? You guys can answer me and we can go back and forth a little bit? Awesome. So I have about 20 minutes to talk to you about how your beliefs affect your health, your body, and I want to see if I can give you a little bit of my experience in the process. So how many of you have a physical goal or something you'd like to improve in your body? Yeah? Okay, cool. How many of you believe it's possible for you guys to achieve that goal? Awesome. How many of you don't believe it's possible to achieve the goal? Okay, a few honest people. That's really good. How many of you had a goal and you tried to reach it and couldn't, or couldn't in that moment, and you gave up on the goal and stopped wanting it? Okay. Okay. Thank you for being honest. I know these are hard questions, but I think I want to be able to help you guys reconnect to the things that you want and see if you guys can build those for yourselves. So one of the first things I wanted to share with you was really more of a thought experiment. So have you guys thought about how you're able to move your hand over your head? It sounds super simple, right? We don't stop to think about how we can take our hand and move it over our head. But if you think for a second, what do? We have a thought. We visualize, or we maybe think about, hey, I want to lift my hand above my head. How does it happen that from the thought that we have, we're able to make things move in our body and lift the hand above our head? Does anybody know? Because if you do, I'd really want to know. We don't necessarily know. And in fact, there's another study that was done by Dr. I think it's Libri. I hope I don't get the name wrong. But they showed, what they did was they studied the time between a thought or an intention until the time you were able to twitch your finger. And they wanted to measure how long it took for a thought to be materialized into an action. And what they found was that your finger twitches before you have the thought. Does anybody else find that weird? That's crazy, right? So my point is, there's a lot of things about how our bodies work and about how we exist that we don't know about, that we have no idea about. But one of the questions that I've been really curious about is, how do our thoughts and our beliefs affect our physical body and affect our ability to materialize what we want to materialize in our lives, whether that's more health, more success, more money, better relationships, whatever those things are. So I put these fancy transitions between, and they just take more time, really. So the first question I asked was, do our beliefs affect our health? How many of you believe your beliefs affect your health? Okay. How many of you believe that they don't affect your health? Whoa, all right, cool. How many of you aren't sure? Okay, cool. So the question that I wanted to ask next was, is there scientific proof that we can heal our bodies? That with a thought or a belief, that we would have some type of effect or healing take place in the body. So, I don't want you to see that yet. Okay, so with that being said, there's, so I started to ask myself this question. I was working with my patients, I was working with myself, and one of the things that started to really bother me was that I knew my words had power. How many of you were just in here for the last talk? How many of you felt moved or felt compelled by the product that she was talking about? Right? So you start to become influenced by words, by science, by the different things that we share with each other, right? There's an influence. And you may not even be aware that you may choose to believe that statement in that moment. Sometimes we choose to believe these things and we're not aware what we're choosing to believe, right? Okay, so that being said, what I wanted to figure out was how much of an effect our beliefs and our words had on each other. Because when I sit down with a patient and they've just been diagnosed with brain cancer, and they're looking at me in their most vulnerable state and they're asking me how long they have to live, that's a really powerful moment. And the words that I say to that patient may have a huge impact on whether or not they believe they can get well or whether or not they believe they're going to die in 3 months. And I found this very disturbing. I found myself in a position where I felt really responsible for the words that I say to people and for the authority I have as a doctor. So I set out to kind of find out more about this topic. And one of the things that I can share with you is that, I'm going backwards, not forwards. Here we go. One of the things I can share with you is that we've been talking about in medicine for over 200 years, the placebo effect. Over 200 years. This was first brought up in 1772. So do you guys know what the placebo effect is? Yeah? Okay. So just simple definition off Google. A beneficial effect produced by a placebo drug or treatment that cannot be attributed to the properties of the placebo itself, but must therefore be due to a patient's belief in that treatment. Okay? So we've known this has existed for 200 years. There's also the opposite effect. If you believe that the treatment is going to have a bad effect, it's been shown to have a bad effect. We've been seeing effects like this for the last 200 years. Now in 2017, there's several different studies I want to share with you just to give you data. So one of the studies they did was a sham acupuncture study. And what they did was they had sham acupuncture needles that you would stick in the patient's body, but the needle would retract. So when they would go to put the needle in, the needle wouldn't go into the body. It would retract into the applicator, and you never actually pierced the skin. So no acupuncture actually happened. Okay? Everybody following me? Cool. So no acupuncture actually happened. 44% of them got better. 44% of them had their IBS relieved. If the doctor did it with empathy and caring, 62% of them got better. Crazy, right? So I don't know, but you tell me, do we think our beliefs are having something to do with that? Now, there's increases in dopamine. So this is a different study with Parkinson's disease. You take a sugar pill, and they start to produce dopamine in their brain, which has an effect on Parkinson's. Another study, sham morphine. They give saline water instead of morphine. Body produces endorphins, pain goes away. Saline water, not morphine. Our beliefs even affect it as precisely as being able to create side effects that we read on the side effects profile, right? So if you believe that chemotherapy would cause your hair to fall out, what they found was when they gave sham chemotherapy, it was not chemotherapy, the patient's hair fell out. You guys are getting this, right? This is crazy, right? Okay, so I don't know how this works, but I can tell you the data. So Mr. Wright, there's a very powerful story I want to share with you. One more just to kind of drive the point home. I don't know if anybody has heard this story before, but there's a doctor, Dr. Kloffler, who really contributed a lot to psychology and projection. And in the Journal of, I think it's Journal of Projection, I forget the name of it, but in one of the specific journals, he tells his account of Mr. Wright. And Mr. Wright is a patient of his. I'm not standing in the light. I was told to stand in the light. Mr. Wright was a patient of his who had cancer. And he had cancer metastasized throughout his whole body. He had cancer that was as large as softballs in the throat, in the axilla, underneath the armpits, in the stomach here, underneath the diaphragm. His liver and his spleen were enlarged. And the tumor was now starting to clog the thoracic duct, which helps drain our lymph. So his lungs were filling up with 2 liters of fluid a day that needed to be drained every single day for him to be able to breathe. So you can imagine, he's in the last stages of cancer. He can't breathe very well. He's on oxygen consistently. He hears that there's a new medicine, carbamazine, that's going to be released, this miracle drug that's going to take care of cancer. So he's very hopeful. His doctors have pretty much given up on him at this point, but he hasn't given up hope. He's waiting for this drug to come out, and he cannot wait to convince his doctor to put him in the study so that he can take the medicine. So of course, he tries, and the doctor says, you're not qualified. His life expectancy needed to be 3 months. He definitely didn't qualify for the study. However, he was very persistent and very hopeful, and he actually convinced Dr. Kloffler to give him the medicine. He gave him the medicine. Within 2 weeks, all of his tumors had melted as if they were melting like ice balls, what are they called? Snowballs on a hot stove. All of them melted. 2 weeks. Now, he enjoyed perfect health for 2 months. He flew on a plane 12,000 miles. Then the newspapers started coming out, and they started revealing that the studies on carbamazine weren't as effective as they thought. The drug really wasn't having very much effect. So what happened was Mr. Wright started to become depressed. He started to believe that the drug didn't have any effect. He fell into a depression, and the cancer returned to his body. Just as bad and just as aggressive as the first time. He still needed to have his lungs drained. He went back to his doctor, Dr. Kloffler, and Dr. Kloffler, at this point, realized what was going on. He didn't have any more options for Mr. Wright and decided he was going to run his own experiment. So what he did was he told Mr. Wright that the last batch of medicine was actually not as, it degraded in the bottle. As they were coming up with the batch, it wasn't properly prepared, and that it degraded in the bottle, and it wasn't high quality. He said, but there's a new batch coming in, and this is super high quality, and it's going to have an effect even faster than the last one. So he waited a weekend so he could get Mr. Wright excited again, so Mr. Wright would be excited, his emotions would be on board, his thoughts would be on board, and then he had him come in, and he gave him distilled water. He did not tell the patient he gave him distilled water. He told him he gave him carbamazine. Gave the patient distilled water. Within less than 2 weeks, all the cancer was gone again. Unfortunately, 2 months later, the newspapers reported out that carbamazine was a sham. It didn't work. None of the studies were true. At this point, unfortunately, Mr. Wright came back in. He believed what the newspapers had said, and he died 2 days later. The doctors tried to explain to him that he healed himself, that it wasn't the medicine that they gave him distilled water. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make the perceptual shift and really take in the fact that he was the one who healed himself, that it was his belief that influenced his body to that effect. And because he couldn't make that perceptual shift, it didn't match his reality enough, he died. So at this point, we know we have a lot of information that we have the ability to heal our bodies, or we're able to have an effect from our beliefs into our direct physiology. Not just to feel better, but literally directly affect the tissue. We have Mr. Bob Cafaro, he healed himself from MS. We have Louise Hay, who healed herself from vaginal cancer. We have numerous accounts in the Noetic Sciences journals. If you look them up online, I've got some at the table in the booth on the side, of spontaneous remissions. Many, many accounts of spontaneous remissions where we heal ourselves, or a person was able to heal without any particular drug or reason why they would heal. So the question that I started to ask was, why aren't we doing this? Why didn't Mr. Wright choose to live? And I just want to, I think essentially what this would take, it would take us really being responsible, becoming aware of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, what we choose. And I think sometimes we're not fully aware of those things. But I wanted to quickly bring to our attention what happens when we don't take responsibility for our thoughts, our emotions, or our behaviors. Once a month I work in the hospital, and I go and I visit many patients there, and these are some of the things that I see. And the man on the right here has diabetes, and he had 2 amputations. He also is on dialysis. Now, diabetes destroys the blood vessels, decreases blood flow, kills your nerves. So I put this up here because we do things that destroy our health. Everybody in here do something that destroys their health? I do, right? We do things that destroy our health, and we keep doing them. We do them so much that I have patients who get toes cut off one at a time, and they keep doing the behavior. They keep eating sugar. They keep smoking cigarettes. And that's okay. But I think the problem is that we're not aware of our choices, and we're not aware of how we make our choices. We're not aware that all of our choices come from an emotional place. We're usually not in touch with the emotion or the physical sensation. And I don't have time to show you right now exactly how that works in an experience, but tomorrow in my lecture, I'll be doing some more experiential things, and we can maybe shine some light on that. But suffice it to say that right now, all of our decisions come from an emotional place. And if that's the case, we're making our decisions, but we're not aware of how we're making them. So we're spending, in just obesity, if we just choose to eat when we don't need to eat, in males, we're spending $2,646 per year more than we need to be. In women, $4,879 on medical care alone. That's not the extra food, that's not everything else, but just on medical care alone. Smoking, inactivity, blood pressure, obesity, diabetes. These are all about $1,000 to $2,000 more a year that we're spending because we don't understand how we're making our choices or how our bodies work. And we don't understand how to make ourselves feel happy or feel joyful without using something external to help us feel joyful or happy. So Deepak Chopra just did an interview I listened to that was amazing, and one of the things he said that is consistent with my experience as a doctor is that about 95% of all chronic illnesses are preventable. And I think this is true. Obesity, smoking, cancers, COPD, most of these we cause in our bodies ourselves. We're responsible for them. So why is it that we don't change our behaviors? And I started thinking about this and I thought maybe we just don't believe that it's possible. Maybe we just don't believe that we can change our behaviors. Maybe we've tried and we've failed and we lost faith in ourselves. Maybe we don't have an awareness of how our emotions work and how our thoughts work, and we find ourselves reacting in a loop, doing the same pattern over and over again. How many of you can relate to that? How many of you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall doing the same behavior and you cannot get yourself to stop doing the same gosh darn behavior, right? Okay, so we have a choice. And our choice is that we can continue doing the same gosh darn behavior over and over again, or we can start to become more self-aware. It takes work, but what you can do is you can start to practice becoming more self-aware. Now, what we've done essentially is, so how do we do this? There's specific practices that we have started to create. I'm going to go a little faster because I want to be mindful of the time. So what we've done is we've created a company called XOS. So it's essentially an 8-platform company. And what it does is we've created specific awareness practices that help you become more aware of your body, your emotions, and your thoughts faster. There's a young girl in the audience who's here, and her name is Isabella. She's going to raise her hand. Come over to the table and come meet her. We have a bunch of mentors that are here as well. Isabella struggled with Tourette's for 14 years, which is a syndrome that, if most people are familiar, the medical community deems uncurable. Isabella has used some of the awareness tools that we have been working with, and she was able to tap into the different sensations in her body and start to understand how she created the tics in her body and how she can uncreate them. So it's really not a miracle in any way, shape, or form, but every single one of us has the power to be able to become aware of how this works and be able to change the decisions we make so that we can create more of the lives that we want for ourselves, more of the health that we want for ourselves.